Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies Man. Once again, and today we're doing another book review. Today we're looking at what I read for the Wasted Weekend. Now, the Wasted Weekend is an extension of Garb August, which is a reading event by Criminali over at the channel Criminali. And he basically wanted a month to celebrate stupid, trashy type stories, right? And the definition for those is basically novelizations, smutty books, men's adventure like type books that are a bit too ridiculous, basically not Tarzan or Doc Savage or Robert E. Howard type stuff, right? Stuff that was like second, third, fourth tier in that genre, right? And, like smutty novel type things, right? And so I've never done Garb August, but I did want to do Wasted Weekend because I thought it'd be, very accessible. And since smutty books was part of the thing, I decided to pick up a Harlequin novel, especially after I saw it at the bookstore, at the used bookstore for like $2. It was on a clearance sale, I think, or something like that, which is why it was so cheap. But my understanding was that Harlequin novels tended to be very spicy, very, racy and very romantic heavy. And there was like a few different lines that you could pick from, right? And this one is an intrigue, which is like a detective novel. I did not expect it to be the way it was. It was very lacking in the steamy, smutty, romantic stuff. It was very procedural-like, which isn't bad. I did enjoy myself reading this, but it wasn't really what I was expecting. And so what ends up happening is that I don't feel like I wasted my time. I did enjoy being part of the Wasted Weekend, but it does give me a bit of pause when it comes to maybe picking up more of this stuff, right? Because I think that this is equivalent to like a really shitty popcorn movie, right? Like the type of movie that you enjoy, it's fun, it's well made, but you're not really there to think about what you're reading or watching. You're just there to, shove some popcorn in your mouth and enjoy 2 hours of your time. This is about a 5-hour novel. At least that's more or less what it took me. I can't remember exactly. It's not like I timed it, but I read it over 3 consecutive kind of sittings. Each sitting lasted about an hour and a half or so about 5 hours total. This is Cold Murder in Kolton Lake. It's by Barri Flowers, who is an American black writer. He lives in Hawaii, I think, and he has quite a long list of books, and he does a lot of work for the Harlequin Intrigue line. He graduated from some prestigious university up in the east side of the U.S., and I think he has a criminology degree, which is where he gets all of the information from this. And this does boast the fact that it is very ahead of other writers. It's very in line with modern forensic analysis and stuff like that, right? And this is published by the Harlequin series or the Harlequin line, and this is under their Intrigue line. And the demographic is adult, although mostly because I don't think teenagers would read this. And there's nothing particularly like bad about anything that happens here. It's very accessible. Even very puritanical type people would probably read this and be fine with it. But it is not something that appeals to children, right? Like this is like the styling of storytelling is pretty unlikely to appeal to like YA readers, if that makes sense. The genres here are detective novel and romance, and the romance is pretty lovey-dovey, kind of wholesome stuff. It's not very serious or racy or smutty at all. It's a very surface level. The characters do have a lot of attraction toward each other, and they do consummate their attraction, but it's very kind of like fade to black, move on very quickly kind of stuff. It does not have an adaptation, although this would be like if Hallmark ever decided to make like action movies, right? Thriller type movies, detective movies. This would be right in line with that stuff. You just get a bunch of medium to highly attractive people that are not very good at acting, and you give them these very basic papers or characters, and you let them play it out. Like that is more or less what this entails, right? And the rating for this is a 3 out of 5, mostly because I was expecting a certain level of smuttiness out of this novel, and I didn't get it, and that's a big disappointment. And then following that, the fact that with the lack of smuttiness, you also kind of realize that the passion for the characters isn't really there. Like, they clearly like each other, but there is a certain distinct lack of passion or of obsession, or I don't know what to call it, but like desire between the characters. There's a lot of tension, a lack of tension, sorry, a big lack of tension between the characters, and in terms of like the storytelling. Like, it all happens a bit too easily in my opinion. So it's enjoyable, it's fun, you do want to figure out who the murderer is, but it's not so exciting. And this might be colored by the fact that I'm recently watching Bates Motel, which isn't exactly the same, but it has a similar feel, right? It's about murders, it's about these characters that are trying to hide and obfuscate the truth, and it's about these characters that are kind of living in a small, kind of separate area, and in Bates Motel, there is so much tension all the time. This comparatively has none, and so it's very, I don't know, it doesn't work in its favor. If I had read this at a different time when I wasn't watching Bates Motel, my opinion might be very different. But within the context of where I exist right now in terms of what content I'm consuming, this is very lackluster in comparison. So the premise here is Scott Linley takes on a new cold case in Kolton Lake, which is an area in Kentucky. I'm pretty sure it's a made-up area of Kentucky. And he follows up with a witness to this murder called Abby Zhang, very Asian name for a character that is depicted here as a very generic white lady, and falls in love with her on the job. And to me, this actually raises concerns about like the legality of this, or like the, maybe not legality, the morality of like a cop, or well, I guess this is an FBI special agent, falling in love with the victim of the case that he's dealing with. Like, I'm sure that happens pretty often, but that sounds like it shouldn't. Like, that sounds like there is some sort of a conflict of interest or some morality issue in there that just is completely removed or not mentioned at all in this book. And the whole time I was like, oh, there's something wrong here with the way they're interacting. But maybe there isn't. I don't know. It just feels like there's some sort of like inconsistency or some sort of like ambiguity to the way they interact, right? So it is what it is. But the plot line here is pretty simple. We open up with a prologue detailing the death of Veronica Liu, who is the aunt of Abby Zhang. And then we open up the normal novel, or the main story, with Scott picking up the cold case, heading to Kolton Lake to meet with Abby Zhang, and then learning that Abby Zhang is also a FBI agent, although she does a different work. So Scott is a like investigator, whereas Abby is a victim specialist. So she helps victims deal with their issues. I guess it's a little bit like therapy, a little bit like talking down people, and a little bit like helping them move on, some sort of counseling, right? But it all happens pretty quickly. It's just kind of like the person that is initially at the scene when something traumatic happens and helps them kind of move on. They talk for a few days, and then people move on to their own life, whatever that may be, right? Yeah, it's pretty interesting concept. I didn't know that this was a thing that the FBI had. And she's also the niece of Veronica Liu, like I said. They meet, they chat. There's an instant attraction between the two characters, and I do like this. I think that the way that Barry Flowers manages to convey these attractions between the characters very well is very well done, right? Is what I meant to say. And he gets some guidance, some information out of her about who else to talk to. And so the rest of the novel is basically spent between two kind of plot points, or two kind of plots that are happening concurrently. One is the dating between Abby and Scott. They hang out at her place where her aunt was murdered, and then they hang out at his spot, which is like a ranch in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, near Louisville, I think. And they do this back and forth, right? And so Scott drives up to Kolton Lake, which is about 90 miles away from Louisville, according to him. And, he goes throughout the town, sometimes with Abby, sometimes by himself, just kind of recounting or retracing the steps of the murder case, and just kind of talking to all the characters, right? At the same time, we get introduced to a secondary kind of plot line, which is the fact that Abby has a stalker, but not really, sort of. He is a guy that has a little bit of an obsession with her because she helped him deal with some trauma, earlier in the year. And so he kind of wants to show her his appreciation. There is this development of emotions from this character. I think his name is Zach. And then immediately, Scott steps in and he's like, hey, leave her alone. You're getting too close, right? And so he does, but he becomes this kind of recurring character to kind of throw us off the trail, if that makes sense. And then we kind of go through a few different characters here. We meet Veronica's partner, who was called Jean Singletary. We meet the mayor, who was Freda Myers, who was a client of Veronica. We meet some of Veronica's old lovers, her ex-husband, and a co-worker of hers who hit on her and she rejected quite easily. And, you know, you get this giant cadre of characters for such a small novel. I mean, it's like 60 characters, maybe less, like 40 characters maybe. They all have names, they all have descriptions. It's very well done, but there's just so many characters and they all kind of end up being one-off or almost like irrelevant most of the time. You know, the really important characters are Veronica Liu, who is the kind of inciting incident, Scott, Abby, and Freda, and then two other characters that are basically Jan Singletary and then Oliver Dillman. And so you get kind of the situation through all of these characters, and then we figure out who the main suspect is. We go see him. There's a twist. A suicide happens, and then another twist happens, and it turns out that the character we thought was the perpetrator actually isn't, and this other character that really barely showed up in the novel was the perpetrator. And we finish off the book with Abby and Scott getting together, and maybe there's more stories for them in the future, but I don't think so, because there is a series of Langley, you know, characters, but they're all different characters in this family. And they make kind of cameo appearances throughout this book. So there is like an interconnected universe in this set of novels, right? So that's it for the plot line. It's pretty good. I did enjoy it. It was very competently done. Like, I did not find myself bored or concerned with the fact that information was given in odd ways. Like, everything was sorted very well. The only thing is that for the vast majority of the book, there's very little tension. You know, Scott doesn't ever have to fight with any of the witnesses. They're all pretty willing to give him information. There is nothing exciting about Scott's work through the case. There are some exciting things here and there, you know, but mostly it's like a threat to Abby. It's the fact that Abby gets kind of pushed down to the ground, and that's basically it. Like, there's these moments of like intrigue that happen that kind of build up, but they never really go anywhere. And so even though the story is interesting, it's lacking in tension. There feels like there has to be more going on, right? Like, Scott has to fight someone, or Scott needs to, bring in a lawyer or something. Like, it feels like there could have been more to this novel. And what ends up happening is that it just feels like it goes by too easily, right? This is like the easiest case possible or something. And it just doesn't feel that exciting, right? But maybe that's just because it's a cold case. I don't know. Characters-wise, we have Veronica Liu, Scott Lingley, Abby Zhang, Freda Myers, Jan Singletary, Oliver Dillman, and, you know, like 20 other characters. And the vast majority of them seem to be Asian or African-American. There are a few white characters, and this isn't an issue. I actually think the representation or the styling of the representation is quite good, in the sense that, like, it is representative of, like, America, right? The thing is that it is not representative of Kentucky. Like, the main character, or the main female character, her aunt, all of the people surrounding her, and all of that stuff are all Asian, where Kentucky only has like a 2% population of Asian people in the whole state. The vast majority of them are white and black, right? And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it just felt really weird that I knew I was reading something in Kentucky, and I just kept seeing like the population demographic of like California. And it really messed with me, because it just didn't really make sense. It kind of pulled me out. And I know it's like a stupid detail to focus on, but it's one that I think kind of kills a little bit of the immersion, if that makes sense, right? So I'll just leave it there. It's not really that important, but yeah. In terms of world building, there really isn't any, because this is a like real life type novel. Kolton Lake is a fake setting, as far as I understand it. And like I said, apparently everyone that's Asian lives in this area, which I guess is possible. In the US, it's pretty common for certain ethnicities and groups to kind of group together in certain areas, right? But it just feels kind of odd. Like, also, because why would they live in like a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere when they could easily live in like Louisville or like some other, big important city in Kentucky, or maybe even in Tennessee, in Nashville or something, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. In terms of artwork and fan service, there's no artwork. The cover is fine, but this character does not look like the way that she's described in the book. She looks too American, too white looking for a character that is very clearly supposed to be very Asian. So I think that's a big fail on that part. This is British though, so maybe that's why. I'm not really sure. There is one sex scene, I guess you could call it. It's very light and kind of, it just fades to black very immediately, and it's not bad per se, but it's just not really what I was expecting out of this line of books, right? And ratings wise, 3 out of 5. Like I said, it's perfectly competent. It's good at what it does, but it is engaging enough to finish the book, right? Otherwise, I would have dropped this. But it's not particularly exciting in any way. There's no tension between the characters. There's no tension in the plot line, and the end resolved itself very nicely, very, properly, but with a lacking kind of proper standoff. Like, there is a standoff at the end of the novel, but it feels like it ends too quickly. The female character ends up being the victim throughout most of the book, and I feel like she should have been a bit more proactive, right? And Scott does come off as a hero, so I guess that works, since that is kind of like the point of this novel, but it's not that great. There are a few other issues with the writing. So this writer loves introducing female characters the same way, which is she was a very attractive woman and then describes the woman. And he does this like constantly. And so every time a new female character is introduced, if you coin flip, you're most likely to land on like heads, which is he describes her as she's very attractive, and then kind of finishes off with the rest of it. And I think like basically every female character except 1 or 2 of them out of like the 15 or 20 that he introduced were introduced that way, which is not bad. I mean, this is like the equivalent of like a CW show. You want everyone to be attractive. But the way that she's described, or the way that every female character is described, is just not appealing, because in such a short novel, with such short chapters, and with so many character introductions, you notice this phrase over and over and over again. And once you notice it, you can't like let go, and you continue to see it, right? And so I thought that was a bit messy. The demographic development of the story, like the demographic of the characters, just doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense. And I feel like there's not enough drama. It is very procedural, and procedural in the sense that it's like almost boring, because like, Scott does all of the things that he's supposed to do in the right way, which is technically good, right? Like, he is doing his job properly. But this is a novel. It's supposed to be entertaining. And if he does this, and then the characters that he's talking to give him all of the information he needs immediately with no fuss and no muss, it means that this story is not really dramatic enough. It's not really exciting enough. And so you end up reading this for like 5 hours. You finish it, and you're like, well, I didn't really get too much out of that. And that's kind of a disappointment, right? And so I guess I did finish or match the point of the wasted weekend. I did waste my time, but I did enjoy myself anyways. I did like it. I just would have expected to like it more than I did. So I probably will keep this. I don't see why I would get rid of it. It's nice. I might give it to my sister or one of my sister's friends. They might like it better than I would. But I don't necessarily think I'll pick up another Harlequin Intrigue novel. I might pick up a different Harlequin line at some point, or maybe just kind of a normal Harlequin novel. I'm not really sure. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.